Fears of war are breaking out as Russia has continued to amass tens of thousands of troops near the border with Ukraine, as Ukraine has begun putting forces on their eastern front as well. There is a concern amongst many that there could be an invasion of Ukraine by Russia, as Vladimir Putin has long been said to want to recreate the Soviet Union. Unfortunately for him, they say that COVID has quashed those plans. But so much for that, because now we're seeing this troop buildup. Now, recently, Joe Biden and Putin just got off a 2-hour meeting. Many people are saying Biden was threatening Vladimir Putin. We will cut you off from the international financial system if you go through with this, which would only exacerbate any potential war. And Russia is no weakling. They've got nuclear weapons. They have a military. Now, they're certainly not the global superpower they were when they effectively were the Soviet Union. I mean, they lost all that power when the satellites and Soviet states broke apart. But Vladimir Putin wants that back. And we saw something similar now, almost 10 years ago with the annexation of Crimea, territory which many would argue is still part of Ukraine, but Russia basically goes in, and then there's an election, quote unquote, and then the people of Crimea basically say, oh, yeah, we want to be a part of Russia. And, you know, it's interesting because some people have suggested, I've spoken with some foreign correspondents, that, yeah, a lot of people in Crimea do view themselves as Russian, but certainly Ukraine does not appreciate their sovereign territory being annexed by Russia. Now, will NATO forces retaliate? I got to be honest, I don't think so. A lot of people have hit me up and said, Tim, you got to talk about what's going on with the potential war between NATO forces and Russia. Things are bubbling up. It could get crazy out there, and it probably won't. I think we have a greater risk of war with China, to be completely honest. It was only a few months ago that Chinese warships were sailing just off the coast of Hawaii and Alaska, basically saying to the U.S., if you want to send warships into our South China Sea, so they say, then we'll do the same to you. If you want to argue that this is international waters, we will do the same to you. Now, of course, just off the coast of Hawaii is international waters. So it's just kind of, you know, you got that annoying kid in school who's like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. He's like putting his hand near you. Yeah, we get it. OK, you are in international waters. It's still quite annoying. But China's argument is this territory is ours and you're directly sailing into it. Now, the segment that I'm producing here isn't so much about what's going on with China, though. It's the fear of war with Russia. Over the past several years, there has been an escalation in tensions pertaining to, oil pipelines and oil monopolies. For instance, Russia has a very strong control over natural gas into the European Union through their Gazprom gas monopoly. And this ties all into the Burisma scandal, Joe Biden, quid pro quo, Qatar-Turkey pipeline, Syria. These issues kind of got put on the sideline when Donald Trump was in office because I don't think he cared that much about the foreign energy capture that the Western forces were concerned with. Trump just wanted to bring energy independence to America. But now that we've got the Biden administration, which is effectively an offshoot of the Obama administration, it's back to the plan, which could include war on Ukraine's eastern front. You see, interestingly, there was a big conflict in eastern Ukraine. And I was actually down there I was in Kiev when all of this started going down with the Euromaidan movement, which led to the ousting of Yanukovych and the exile. I believe he fled to Russia. And so everything was getting crazy, and there was a real fear of a Ukrainian civil war because the question is, will Ukraine join NATO or the Russian Federation with Vladimir Putin's attempt to rebuild the Soviet Union? And it looks like NATO is winning. Russia, in turn, is now going to start amassing forces on their western front and the eastern front in Ukraine, which is leading Joe Biden to make a bunch of threats he probably can't back up because I don't think anybody believes Joe Biden's threats have any merit. We all saw what happened in Afghanistan. And one of the reasons I think Vladimir Putin may be saying, line up the troops, it's time to take Ukraine, is because he knows it's now or never. Joe Biden is too weak to do anything about it, so things may get spicy. But I got to say, I got that normalcy bias, that optimism bias. It's not going to happen. We're not in that era, but we'll see. Let's read the news. We got a bunch of stories breaking down what's going on with the images of Russian forces amassing on the Ukraine border. leaving the U.S. and NATO worried. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member if you want to support these videos, my work, and our staff of journalists. We write the news, man. We write stories that we think are important, and the only reason it's happening is because you guys signed up as members. That's it. That is our business plan. We're not going after clicks like BuzzFeed. We're not going to chase any audience narrative like they did with ABC. I reject that premise. What I say is, you want to be a member? Thank you. Your efforts as a member will help support journalists who have the freedom to write what they think is important. Of course, we have editorial guidelines. We have editorial staff. But I'm not telling them what to write. I'm telling them what I think is interesting, but I don't dictate. I'll put in an article in our Slack and be like, hey, did you guys see this? That's about it. 99.9% of all the stories are just our writers finding things and writing about them because they think it's important. We also have an editor-in-chief and executive editor who give out ideas and assignments as well, but editorially independent. We are not going to chase audiences or chase clicks. We're going to chase good journalism, good fact-checking, and we're going to ask you to help back it up as a member. And we'll grow to the point where we can. And so long as you guys keep signing up and supporting our work, we're going to keep hiring more journalists. Fact checkers are next. So thank you for supporting our work. You'll also get access to our members only segments. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this show with your friends. If you want them to know what's going on with this, let's break down a ton of news as to the motivations of Vladimir Putin and what's currently happening. From Business Insider, they report satellite images show the buildup of Russian forces near Ukraine that have the U.S. and NATO worried about an invasion. New satellite photos show the buildup of Russian armed forces at the strategic locations in western Russia near the Ukrainian border and at one spot in Crimea amid concerns that Russia will invade its neighbor in the near future. The images, which Insider obtained from Maxar Technologies, shows a number of Russian tactical battle groups, including both personnel and equipment, such as tanks, artillery, and armored troop carriers, deployed to the Pogonovo training area and Yelnya in Russia and Novozernoye in Crimea in November. After snap drills in the spring near Ukraine triggered a few alarms, tensions de-escalated for a time. But alarm bells began ringing again when a significant number of Russian troops were observed gathering a couple hundred miles from Ukraine's border early last month. Amid a flurry of reports on the Russian troop buildup, State Department and Pentagon officials publicly characterized Russian activity as unusual and expressed some concern over Russia's lack of transparency about the reasons for the troop increase. Toward the end of November, Bloomberg reported that the U.S. had shared concerns about the possibility of an invasion, as well as intelligence indicating that Russia is positioning forces for a possible multi-directional push into Ukraine with allies and partners in Europe. Quote, I would not downplay this. Jeffrey Edmonds, a former CIA military analyst and Russia expert at CNA, told Insider at the time, the troop buildup is pretty significant. I think you always have to assume it's a real possibility, Jim Townsend, a former Pentagon and NATO official and security expert at the Center for New American Security, said. And in a podcast discussion last month, Michael Kaufman, the research program director for the Russian Studies program at CNA, said he doesn't think there is going to be a Russian military operation in the coming days and weeks, but added that he is very worried looking into the coming months and toward this winter. Now, personally, it looks like the staging is for a reason. Like I said, we saw something similar before they annexed Crimea. I doubt Russia is spending all this money for no reason, just to posture. They're planning something. And I would say it may not happen soon, but I think it'll happen soon enough. Joe Biden has proven himself to be incapable, in my opinion. His disapproval ratings are through the roof. And there's no way Mr. Trunanana Pressure Batacaf Care, those are gibberish statements he said, is going to be able to handle Vladimir Putin. I mean, Putin is a rough dude, and he's got a plan. And I think he knows Biden ain't going to do nothing about it. Now, if Trump were to get into office again, that'd be bad news for Putin because Trump is a hothead. Trump actually gave weapons to the Ukrainians. So Vladimir Putin would have to make a move before 2024 if Trump were to be president. Now, the key time to act for Putin may be in any potential transition of power. So if something happens to Joe Biden, we already saw a temporary transfer to Kamala Harris while he was undergoing a medical procedure, as it were. Vladimir Putin will absolutely wait until the time is right. So who knows when? Insider says Biden administration officials revealed late last week that U.S. intelligence indicates Russia could invade early next year with a force as large as 175,000 troops, according to multiple reports. One official said that the Russian plans call for a military offense against Ukraine as soon as early 2022, with a scale of forces twice what we saw this past spring during Russia's rapid military buildup near Ukraine's borders. The plans involve extensive movement of 100 battalion tactical groups with an estimated 175,000 personnel, along with armor, artillery, and equipment. The administration official said, further explaining that the U.S. estimates half of these units are already near Ukraine's border. Though Russia has denied having plans to invade, the buildup comes as Russia has expressed frustration with what he considers to be, I think they mean Putin, a lack of respect for Russia's red lines, NATO activity, Ukraine's pro-Western leanings, and political obstacles in Ukraine running contrary to Russian interests. Quote, I don't accept anybody's red lines, President Joe Biden told reporters Friday, adding that the U.S. would probably need to have a lengthy discussion with Putin about Russian activities. The White House announced over the weekend that two leaders will talk Tuesday, and they did, and we have that update. From justthenews.com, Biden and Putin conclude roughly 2-hour video call over possible Russia invasion on Ukraine. Just the News reports President Biden met Tuesday for about 2 hours with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in a video call in which the president was expected to seek a diplomatic solution for Russia assembling tens of thousands of troops near the Ukraine border for a possible invasion, but also tell Putin the U.S. is ready to impose austere sanctions. I'm sure Putin cares. Joe Biden already allowed them to move forward on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is through, I'm forgetting the name of the sea, but northern Europe from Russia into Europe. That says right there that Joe Biden is weak. The sanctions are meaningless. And if Vladimir Putin wants to invade Ukraine and rebuild his Soviet dream, you think he's going to care about your financial restrictions? If he's been planning this, he's been planning this, which means your sanctions will be the least of his worries. The call went from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Washington, D.C. time. There is no official information released about the call. Biden could have vowed to cut Russia off from international financial systems, the SWIFT payment network, according to the New York Times. Putin was expected to demand guarantees from Biden the NATO military alliance would never expand to include Ukraine, which has long sought membership, according to the AP. Quote, we've consulted significantly with our allies and believe we have a path forward that would impose significant and severe harm on the Russian economy, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Monday. You can call that a threat. You can call that a fact. U.S. intelligence officials have determined that Russia has amassed 70,000 troops near the Ukraine border and has made preparations for a possible invasion early next year. Now, this could be posturing on the part of Russia. They believe that NATO will induct Ukraine, and if they do, that's a very serious threat to Russia. That means Ukraine on the border with Russia would start building up NATO forces. So Russia is setting up their forces. Why? This could be in the event that NATO moves into Ukraine, and they may have already, I'm not entirely sure, then Russia simply says, we're going to move in and secure our Western front before NATO can get a foothold. Otherwise, the pressure will be on Russia. Ukraine's defense ministry alleged that Russia is holding training camps under the leadership of regular servicemen of the Russian armed forces. The Kremlin hasn't commented on the allegations. A lot of speculations about what's happening. We got this think piece from NBC News. Why Russia could be trying to invade Ukraine and how Biden could stop it. For Putin, a toxic confluence of domestic pressures and international opportunities is shaping an outcome that could be catastrophic. The fuse that for decades has been linked to the perennial European powder keg of Ukraine is growing ever shorter. Russian troops are, as they did 7 years ago before the Crimea invasion, massing in force along the border. So this we all know. We know there's going to be a phone call. They say, for one thing, Putin very much needs a distraction right now. COVID-19 has devastated his country, with the virus's death toll for October setting records, according to official figures. At the same time, inflation rates at more than 8% have sapped buying power and raised lending rates beyond, leaving the country restless and grumbling. Beyond that, Putin most likely sees a big geopolitical opportunity. Many of his perpetual foes are tottering. Germany's longtime Iron Chancellor, Angela Merkel, whom Putin seems to have both feared and respected, has given way to a new, untested liberal successor atop a fragile coalition in Berlin. Over the last 5 years, Donald Trump and now Joe Biden have run roughshod over NATO's vaunted unity. Trump blatantly criticized NATO's refusal to shoulder more of financial burdens. Biden, while openly endorsing its democratic principles, undermined NATO with his unilateral decision to withdraw from Afghanistan and then blatantly undercut France in a submarine deal with Australia and Britain. My personal feeling is that much of this has left Putin questioning whether Biden is capable of reacting effectively or of mustering allies effectively in the event that Russia does try something. It is beyond that, good sir, NBC, who wrote this. David A. Andelman. It's beyond that. Come on, let's be real. Just come out and say it. Putin watches the same videos we do of sputtering, mumbling Joe Biden reading a teleprompter, and it's fooling no one. Sure, there are a lot of people in America who have plugged their ears and closed their eyes and said everything is fine with Joe Biden, but they know, we know, they know, and they know, we know, they know. Joe Biden is not with it. He does not have the capabilities to stand up and effectively lead right now. And you think Kamala Harris does? No, she doesn't. Putin has a dream, the Soviet Union. He remembers those glory days, and he knows. Now's his chance. Let's go back in time a little bit. 28th of March, 2014, from the BBC, Vladimir Putin, the rebuilding of Soviet Russia. What could have put this on hold? Could it have been that in 2014, with the spark of the Ukrainian crisis, Vladimir Putin was very much dead set on rebuilding the Russian, we'll just call it the Russian Union. Rebuilding something. I don't want to say, we say Soviet Russia because we're putting allusions to the large union that existed. But Putin just wants to bring back a large, powerful European Asian force. Donald Trump gets in. And Donald Trump is sporadic and ill-tempered, to say the least. And all of a sudden, things kind of slowed a bit. Not completely. Trump fired missiles into Syria. But we saw a lot of this kind of on the back burner. Could it be that Vladimir Putin was sitting back going, ugh, Donald Trump, this guy will press the button. He will. Everybody was worried. All these foreign adversaries were like, this guy's insane. He could press the button, the nukes at any moment. Check this out. The BBC reported in 2014. They say the world was stunned when Russia invaded Crimea. But should it have been? Author and journalist Oliver Burlow says President Vladimir Putin never kept secret his intention to restore Russian power. What's less clear, he says, is how long the country's rise can continue. The rebuilding of Soviet Russia was something I long heard about. When I was on the ground there, when I was talking with foreign correspondents and individuals in Ukraine, they were saying, look, Putin there is a Russian trade federation, but he wants something bigger, more powerful. And who wouldn't? People are driven to power. Not everybody, but these leaders. Take a look at this from Newsweek in 2017. Putin wants to rebuild Soviet Union. Former head of British Army warns. We could all see this coming. Did the U.S., NATO, the West prepare for what we're seeing now with Vladimir Putin? Newsweek wrote, in 2017, Russian President Vladimir Putin essentially wants to rebuild the Soviet Union and restore Russia as a major power in the world. General Sir Mike Jackson, former head of the British Army, warned Thursday, quote, I always like to remind people regarding Vladimir Putin that he said publicly that the worst thing, let me underline that happened in the 20th century, worse than 2 world wars, worse than the Holocaust, worse than the Great Depression, the worst thing was the fall of the Soviet Union. It tells you quite a lot, I think, about Putin, because he sees modern Russia as the inheritor of the great power status which the Soviet Union used to have, and I think he's trying to rebuild that. It's a theme which is there to rebuild modern Russia as a major power in the world, as the Soviet Union was in his view. Jackson added, of the former KGB officer turned world leader. And funny enough, they show this image of Trump and Putin together. My opinion is that Trump forced Putin to hold back. I don't think Trump was working with Russia in any capacity. I think the evidence shows that. It certainly shows that there have been tons of international whatever between tons of people, but nothing concrete. Noise, as it were. Now, we know the Democrats did, the Steele dossier, and I don't want to get into all that stuff, but they did work with some Russians. In the article, they say Jackson seemed to be referencing an address Putin delivered in 2005 to the nation's top politicians in parliament, in which he said, above all, we should acknowledge that the collapse of the Soviet Union was a major geopolitical disaster of the century. As for the Russian nation, it became a genuine drama. Tens of millions of our co-citizens and co-patriots found themselves outside Russian territory. Moreover, the epidemic of the disintegration infected Russia itself. Interesting, to say the least. And then we have this story from April 28th, 2020. Coronavirus crisis spells doom for Putin's dreams of rebuilding the Soviet empire. From the Atlantic Council. Yeah, you guys might know them. Not to say I'm a big fan, but they're certainly of the opinion, at least in this article by Solomia Bobrovska, that Vladimir Putin wants to rebuild the Soviet Union, but he is being held back. Now, can it happen? Yeah, I think so, especially with someone as weak as Joe Biden. The Daily Mail says Ukraine warns of a bloody massacre and 5 million refugees fleeing into Europe if Russia invades. As Kremlin says, escalating tensions are off the scale. Ukraine's defense minister, Oleksiy Reznikov, said there would be a bloody massacre if Russia invaded Kiev. And yeah, no fooling, that's true. U.S. President Joe Biden will call Putin. They did. Satellite images have revealed huge new camps of Russian troops. Kiev accused Russia of deploying tanks and additional snipers to the front line amid warnings Russia to invade. The New York Times, what's driving Putin's Ukraine brinksmanship? There are tactical reasons for threatening an invasion, but the real cause may lie in the Kremlin's fixation with righting what it sees as historical injustice. This right here from December 5th, a modern retelling. Vladimir Putin is outraged the Soviet Union collapsed. I bet he mourned. I mean, he's a former KGB guy. He was very much all on board for the Soviets. And he felt that pain when the Soviet Union collapsed. What year was it? 91, was it? I believe it was 91. We were talking about this last night. I was in kindergarten or first grade, I think. Let's see. That would put me in probably kindergarten, I think, when the Soviet Union fell. I don't have any real strong memories of exactly what happened. I vaguely remember sitting in my basement and the news was on or something to that effect, but it's basically a baby. Beyond my years. But you guys know Luke Rutkowski, one of the co-hosts, or frequent guests, I should say more appropriately, on Timcast IRL. He was born in Poland during the Soviet era. Poland was a satellite state of the Soviet Union, very much under their control. His parents fled to get away from all that stuff. This is not beyond our years as millennials. And now as I'm 35, I'm going to be 36 in 4 months. 4 months today, I'll be 36 years old. We are inheriting this world and staring down the barrel of possible wars. And our parents were in that world, watching that news of the Cold War and the Soviet Union. And it's only been the past few decades that we have had this kind of peace. Yeah, people don't get it, man. 100 years ago, World War I. Well, I think at that point, when was the armistice? It was like, 1919 or something. I can't remember. A 20-year armistice. Maybe I'm getting my years way off. I got to read more history. A 20-year armistice, they called it, because then, sure enough, World War II. War is the more natural state of the world, as horrifying as that sounds. And it's only because we in the United States and we younger generations didn't experience it that we think the world and we think no war is actually the natural state. It's not true. The U.S. especially has always been in some kind of war. But I mean like real war. I mean like international conflict, sabotage. We're very much still involved in low-tier, low-scale information war and espionage and cyber attacks and things like that. 4th and 5th generational warfare for sure, but hot war. Just kinetic warfare. That's how the world's always been, because people fight and compete for resources. And the scary thing is that if we do have a large-scale war, it says in the 4th turning, if you're familiar with Strauss-Howe generational theory, that every war is fought with the most powerful weapons. I think social media may be one of the most powerful weapons today because it allows you to control the population without lifting a finger or firing a bullet. But let's be real. Nuclear weapons and hypersonic weapons, very powerful. And the scary thing about everything is that offense has escalated to such a degree that there is no defense. So there was something called, I believe it was the Strategic Defense Initiative. We wanted some kind of weapons system, rockets and potentially lasers to take out intercontinental ballistic missiles should they be fired and headed towards the U.S. We have some things like THAAD in the Koreas, and we have the Iron Dome in Israel. These are weapons defense system rockets that fire up in the air and blow up incoming rockets. Crazy, brilliant systems. But with hypersonic technologies, these new weapons can easily bypass these defense initiatives, in which case you ain't seen nothing. You look back to the photos or the images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you ain't seen nothing. The multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicle, which has been around as long as I can remember since I've been a kid, can fire one ICBM with up to 12 warheads, peppering the entire eastern seaboard with nuclear warheads. These ICBMs have 1,250 times the power of the bombs that were used in World War II. It ain't no joke. So we want to avoid any kind of warfare because, heaven forbid, we actually re-enter some kind of Cold War. We're already in one with China, and this spells bad news. But this is why there are a lot of global elites who want to create strong international business ties, even if it means sacrificing our values and ponying up and bending the knee to places like to groups like the Chinese Communist Party, because they're like, it is better that we live in an awful world than we all die in a blaze of nuclear hellfire. But I don't know, man. I just don't know. Is it really living to live under an authoritarian boot, to stand by and compromise your values as the Soviets try to regain power, Vladimir Putin? Not so much. Well, a lot of people are saying no. We have this story from Newsweek. Russia fighter intercepts UK aircraft of the Black Sea. This is from just last month, and these stories we see a lot. The tensions escalating between Western forces and Russia. But here we go. This is an old story. This is a story from April. We've seen this give and take, right? Russia to withdraw troops from Ukraine border Crimea. The buildup has raised alarms. We know that they've done this before, and then they've brought the troops back. The Guardian reports, prepare a swift response to Russia invading Ukraine, Latvia tells West. NATO not sending a clear signal would mean glue that keeps us together has failed, says foreign minister. Latvia is certainly saying ain't no thing. We got this. U.S. will push Germany to agree to stop the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline if Putin invades Ukraine, sources say. And then we have American bombers. I'm sorry, this is an older story. This is from March. This is the wrong one. But we have this another story of clashes. American bombers blaze towards Russia in provocative show of force. This actually, these few stories that I've shown in the just here may actually be good news. It shows that there's a lot of posturing. The Russians have brought their troops up here before. They've pulled them back. Seems to be a bit of a distraction, maybe saber rattling, and I certainly hope so. Because we don't want to see what could be. The Hill writes today, the U.S. can't deter a Russian invasion of Ukraine and shouldn't even try. That means the rise, the return of this Russian superpower. If they get control of Ukraine, if they start moving in unimpeded. But I think the Hill is right, maybe for different reasons. I don't think the U.S. can deter the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Joe Biden doesn't have the wherewithal to plan effectively, nor does Mark Milley or any of the other leaders currently serving in the Biden administration. Trump, maybe, and that's only a maybe. The Hill says, the first rule of international relations, the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must. The second rule is that most of the time, not even the superpowers can change the first rule. Unfortunately, advocates of a strong U.S. security commitment to Ukraine seem not to understand these rules. They believe instead that Washington can somehow prevent strong Russia from doing what it will with weak Ukraine. But this is a fantasy. The harsh reality is that Washington can't deter a Russian invasion of Ukraine and shouldn't even try. It's a scary prospect. I got friends from Ukraine. Some of them have fled, and they're no longer there. It's a harsh place to be. I like the country. The food's good. Yeah, a lot of cabbage, to be honest. It was like cabbage and beef. And they didn't know the difference between yogurt and sour cream, which is really weird when I was ordering food and I was like, hey, can I get some sour cream? And they were like, sure. And it was yogurt. And they were like, what's the difference? And I'm like, yo, there's a big difference between yogurt and sour cream. at least here in the United States. But Ukraine was great. I was there in late 2013, early 2014 with the Ukraine Euromaidan stuff, and that was what was kicking this all off. And we knew back then it was NATO versus Russia. It was obvious. It wasn't some organic protest movement. It was who wants to be a part of Russia, who wants to be a part of NATO. There are many in Ukraine who fear what it means to rejoin Russia. It means that it'll be very much like it was during the Soviet years with the Holodomor. And that's a nightmare to a lot of people. I actually met a Soviet general, Ukrainian, who was opposing what Russia was trying to do. Many of these people wanted to join NATO for the protection. But Vladimir Putin won't allow that. He annexes Crimea, he amasses troops, and he basically says, you are not going to induct Ukraine. This war is far from over. At the very least, what this says to me is that Putin does believe he will succeed in reforming some kind of Soviet Union. I say some kind of because it won't be called that. Who knows what it'll be. But I feel like Vladimir Putin refusing to let NATO take Ukraine is him saying, no, 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 no. There will be war, and we will fight, and we will not let you take this piece of the puzzle from us. I think it's bad news if the Soviet Union gains that much power. Or I should say Russia rebuilds the Soviet Union, and then they amass that much power. I wasn't old enough, mature enough to understand what was going on during the Cold War. I was a little kid. But our parents lived it. It has only been a few decades of this kind of peace. Now we have the tensions with China. These international elitists, they genuinely believe that if we do all these trade deals, there will be no more war. And that's just stupid. Because we have different cultural beliefs and religious beliefs, and this means people will be on edge. If the U.S. can't even get along with itself with the culture war, what makes you think the culture clash between, say, Russia and the U.S. would not be worse? But we'll see. Pray that we get some strong leadership before anything breaks down, but we're trapped in this. It's funny. They say that, Putin helped Trump win. If anything, Putin would have wanted Biden to win because Trump was aggressive and Biden is weak. And now is the time that Putin has to move in. That scares me. We'll see how this plays out. I really don't know. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Come hang out live. Steve Bannon will be joining us. A lot to talk about. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.